What? $5 million to break up? Seriously, $50,000 a month? Just play the part. I'd woken up in this life as a stand-in and staring down a $50,000 monthly salary. I caved. What can I say? The money was just too damn good. So, for 50 grand a month, I transformed myself into the consummate professional, a walking, talking generator of emotional support, a master of the role. I took a script straight out of a soap opera and turned it into a high-paying career. 3 years later, the contract was up. The golden boy, the one I was a substitute for, was back in the country. I was supposed to walk away with my $5 million severance package, no strings attached. But then the guy himself offered me an extra $500 grand just to disappear faster. Seriously, who did he think he was dealing with? For $500,000, I'd disappear so fast I'd leave a puff of smoke. But when the CEO came chasing after me full of regret, I just pulled out my phone and dialed the golden boy. Your fiancé just offered me a $60,000 raise to come back. We're going to need to adjust my exit bonus. There's no such thing as rekindling an old flame. There's only a working man protecting his hard-earned cash. I stared at the face in the bathroom mirror, my fingers tracing the nearly invisible scar on my chin. Isabella Vance had put it there last week. Drunk and clumsy, her nail catching my skin. Julian, you never had a scar here. I just smiled, gently taking her wrist. You're remembering it wrong. She stared at me for a few long seconds, then shoved me away and stumbled toward the bedroom, mumbling, "No, you're not him." I stood my ground, steadying her as she passed. Of course, I wasn't him. My name is Ethan Blackwood, and I'm not from around here. 3 years ago, I woke up in the middle of a cheesy romance novel. Something like the CEO's counterfeit love as the professional stand-in for the female lead's one true love. The plot was classic melodrama. The real love, Julian Croft, had to go abroad for family reasons. The CEO, Isabella Vance, missed him so desperately she found a look-alike to fill the void. 3 years later, Julian returns. The stand-in is supposed to vanish, but the CEO realizes she's actually fallen for the replacement. Cue the dramatic, desperate chase to win him back, and I was that unlucky stand-in. Except I didn't feel unlucky at all. In fact, I felt like the luckiest bastard on earth because Isabella Vance paid a lot. $50,000 a month after taxes. For that kind of money, I'd do just about anything, playing the part of her perfect devoted boyfriend. A walk in the park. Mr. Blackwood, Ms. Vance's car is here, the house manager said softly from outside the door. Got it. I snapped out of my thoughts, adjusting my tie, making sure every detail was flawless. The deep blue subtly patterned suit, the silver cufflinks, the Patek Philippe on my right wrist worth more than my last apartment. All of it was curated to Julian Croft's exact tastes. Not a single thread out of place. God, I was good. I walked out of the sprawling Connecticut mansion to the waiting black Maybach. The driver held the door, and I gave a slight nod as I slid into the back. Isabella was looking down at a tablet. She glanced up when I got in, a hint of softness appearing on her cool, beautiful face. Morning. Morning, Bella. I replied with a smile, retrieving her favorite iced Americano from the built-in cooler. 2 sugars. I figured the board meeting today would be rough. She paused, taking the coffee. Her fingertips brushed the back of my hand. How did you know about the board meeting? You mentioned on a call last Friday, I said casually, pulling a folder from my briefcase. Here's that market analysis you wanted. I added some updated Q3 data. She took the folder, her eyes flickering as she scanned the first few pages. I knew what she was thinking. This was the kind of thing Julian used to do. And I was just a guy on the payroll for the last 3 years. I had trained myself to be a better Julian than Julian himself. I knew her favorite coffee. Knew she got nervous before big meetings. Knew she'd instinctively reach for someone's hand when she had a nightmare. For 50 grand a month, you better believe I earned every single penny. The car slipped into the underground garage of Vance Industries Tower. Isabella closed the folder. There's a charity gala tonight. You're coming with me. Of course, I said. I paused, then added. Anything specific I need to prepare for? She gave me a complicated look. No, just be the same as always. I smiled. Understood. The same as always. At the gala, I'd have to speak with Julian's cadence, mingle with Julian's confidence, and if necessary, kiss her the way Julian would. I had zero problem with any of it. In fact, it was almost funny. A ridiculous, high-paying gig in a world that felt like a TV show. Good thing I was a professional. I knew my boundaries and I never ever crossed my employers. And as for that last part, kissing her, please. I've got a raid scheduled with my guild tonight. I'd call her ma'am for the money, but physical contact outside the contract, not a chance. The gala was held at the most opulent hotel in Manhattan. As Isabella took my arm and we walked in, every head in the room turned. Isabella, my dear, and who is this? One of the board members asked, giving me an appraising look. Ethan Blackwood? He's my. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. I stepped in smoothly, extending a hand. A pleasure to meet you, sir. I'm a friend of Isabella's. A friend. That was our official story. No one knew I was just a placeholder. Halfway through the evening, Isabella was cornered by a group of business partners. I made myself scarce, retreating to a quiet corner with a glass of champagne. That's when I felt it, a sharp, focused stare. I turned. Standing not far away, a wry smile playing on his lips, was a man who looked like an older, more polished version of me. My heart gave a single hard thump. Julian Croft. My hand tightened on the champagne flute, but my expression remained perfectly placid. He walked toward me, each step a study in calculated grace. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, his tie a muted, dark pattern almost identical to my own. Or rather, my entire wardrobe had been designed to mimic his. And you are, he asked as he came to a stop, his smile never wavering. Ethan Blackwood. I raised my glass in a slight toast. Mr. Croft, I've heard a lot about you. He let out a soft chuckle. His eyes swept over the Patek on my wrist, then back to my face. Isabella's taste hasn't changed, I see. I didn't reply, just took a sip of champagne. Julian swirled the wine in his glass, then leaned in, his voice dropping. Do you know why I came back early? I don't, and I don't care. I said with a pleasant smile. I'm just here to do a job. His eyes narrowed. He clearly hadn't expected the bluntness. You're a professional, he said, his tone flat. But this game is over. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, $500,000, he said, looking me straight in the eye. You signed a termination agreement with her. Take it. And you disappear completely. I almost laughed out loud. This wasn't in the original script. My $5 million severance plus $500,000 from him. This was the deal of a lifetime. But on the outside, I was cool as a cucumber. Mr. Croft, I have a legally binding contract with Ms. Vance. The penalty for breach is 10 times the remaining salary. I know, he said with a smirk. So tell me, what's your price? I shrugged. I'm just here to fulfill my contract. He got it instantly. 1 million, he countered. To walk away tonight. I held his gaze for 2 seconds, then broke into a grin. Deal. Our glasses clinked together with a sharp, satisfying sound. The man knew exactly what motivated me. When Isabella returned, Julian was gone. Who were you talking to? She asked, frowning in the direction he disappeared. An investor. We were just discussing market trends. I lied smoothly, taking the empty glass from her hand. Tired? We can head out if you want. She shook her head, her gaze distant. Not yet. There are a few more people I need to see. I nodded and said, no more. I knew the real story was about to begin. Sure enough, the next morning, Isabella's lawyer called. Mr. Blackwood, Ms. Vance would like to terminate your contract ahead of schedule. The impeccably dressed lawyer slid a folder across the polished table. As per the agreement, this is a check for $5 million. I signed the documents without a second thought. So quickly, the lawyers seemed taken aback. You seem quite ready to move on, Mr. Blackwood. It was just a job, I said, smiling as I pocketed the check. Please thank Ms. Vance for her generosity these past 3 years. Walking out of Vance Industries Tower, the sun was so bright, I had to squint. My phone buzzed, a wire transfer notification, $1 million from Julian Croft's private account. I let out a low whistle and hailed a cab. Airport, please. 3 days later, I was in Miami Beach. I was stretched out under a cabana on a private stretch of sand, sunglasses on, lazily sipping ice-cold coconut water. The phone next to me lit up. A text from Julian. She's looking for you. I snorted and shut the phone off completely. The money was in the bank. Who cared what happened next? I rolled over, ready for a nap when a shadow fell over me. Ethan, the familiar voice made my entire body go rigid. I slowly lowered my sunglasses. Isabella Vance was standing over me. Her face was pale with faint dark circles under her eyes. She clearly hadn't slept. I've been looking for you for 3 days, she said, her voice raw. Why didn't you answer your phone? Wait, how did she find me? It hit me a second later. Of course, she tracked me. She had the resources to track anyone. I sat up, sighing. Isabella, the contract is over. I don't want the contract, she said, her voice rising, drawing glances from a few nearby sunbathers. I want you. So, the dramatic chase was on. Interesting. I rubbed my temples. Isabella, you need to calm down. I am calm, she said, her eyes locked on mine. I've had 3 days to think. It wasn't Julian I love. It's you. The habits, the little things. That was all you, Ethan. Not him. I was silent for a moment, then I laughed. Isabella, do you know why I was so convincing for 3 years? She just stared, confused. Because I was acting, I said, meeting her gaze directly. The temperature of every coffee, every perfectly timed word of concern. Every single gesture, it was all calculated. After all, I added, 50,000 a month is powerful motivation, don't you think? The color drained from her face. You paid. I performed, I said, getting to my feet and brushing the sand off my shorts. We're even. The books are closed. I turned to walk away. Ethan, she grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. How much did Julian give you? I'll double it. I stopped, let out a long breath, and pulled out my phone. I dialed Julian. What? Julian's voice came through the speaker, sharp and impatient. Your girl's here, I said, my tone bored. You should probably come get her. There were 2 seconds of silence on the other end, then a cold laugh. Send me the address. 20 minutes later, a ridiculous scene unfolded under a nearby beach cabana. Isabella and Julian were locked in a bitter argument while I sat to the side, sipping my coconut water like I was watching a movie. You don't love him. You're just used to being taken care of, Julian snapped. Oh, the terrible dialogue. And you, Isabella shot back. You disappear for 5 years and come back the second you need Vance Industries to fund your new venture. Julian's face went slack. You investigated me. I couldn't help it. I had to chime in. Excuse me. Can I go now? They both whipped their heads around to glare at me. Mr. $1 million. Please stay out of it, Julian gritted out. What? $1 million? Isabella asked, her focus instantly sharpening. The situation was spiraling. So, I stepped in. In the end, after my mediation, Isabella reluctantly agreed to at least talk things out with Julian. That night, I was on a flight to Santa Fe. The only way to survive was to get as far away from the plot as possible. The flagstones of the old adobe city gleamed after a light rain. I sat on the second-floor balcony of my boutique hotel, slowly sipping a cup of artisanal coffee from a local roaster. My phone lit up. The 17th missed call from Julian. I just swiped the notification away. The money was mine. There was no after-sale service. The hotel owner, a woman with a warm, sun-weathered face, brought out a plate of sliced fruit. Mr. Blackwood, hiking up in the mountains today? No, I think I'll just wander around the city, I said, pouring her a cup of my coffee. Is it always this quiet? It's the off-season, nice and peaceful, she said, sitting across from me with a conspiratorial twinkle in her eye. A young man like you traveling all alone? No girlfriend? I just smiled. Freedom is a precious thing. She nodded as if she understood, then bustled downstairs to attend to other guests. I leaned back, looking at the distant cloud-shrouded peaks, and breathed a long sigh of relief. This was the life. No contracts, no role-playing, no hysterical CEOs. My peace was shattered that evening. Mr. Blackwood. The owner came rushing up the stairs, looking flustered. There's a lady downstairs looking for you. She says she's your fiancé. The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. Isabella. She found me again. I shot to my feet and looked over the balcony railing. Down below, dressed in casual jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, Isabella Vance was looking right up at me. When our eyes met, a triumphant smile spread across her face. Found you. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in the hotel's quiet tea room. The air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Where did you find me? I asked bluntly. Your credit card transactions, she said, her tone deceptively casual as her fingers traced the rim of her cup. Ethan, you underestimate the resources of Vance Industries. I rubbed my temples. Isabella, we're done. No, we're just beginning. She suddenly grabbed my hand, her grip like a vice. I spent the last 3 days doing my research. Julian only came back for our new energy division. He doesn't love me. I tried to pull my hand away. What does that have to do with me? It has everything to do with you. Her nails dug into my skin. You were the one by my side for 3 years. The coffee, the reports, all of it was an act. I cut in calmly. Isabella, you paid for a substitute for Julian. You didn't pay for me. Her eyes instantly reddened. Then tell me this. Last year when I had that fever and was hospitalized, you stayed with me for 3 days straight without sleeping. Was that an act, too? I paused for a second. I remember that. She had a 102 degrees fever, and the doctor said it was from overwork and stress. My contract required me to play the part of a caring boyfriend. But when she grabbed my hand in a delirious haze and whispered, "Don't go," I'd stayed a little longer than I had to. That was professional integrity, I finally said. Isabella shot to her feet. The teacup tipped over, its contents spreading across the dark wood table. Fine, just fine, she said, her voice trembling. Then I'm hiring you again. Double the salary. 120,000 a month. I sighed, took out my phone, and dialed Julian. What now? Julian's voice was dripping with irritation. Your fiancé is over here offering me 120K a month to poach me, I said lazily. According to our agreement, a situation like this requires a renegotiation of my bonus. I heard something crash on the other end of the line. 5 seconds later, Julian's voice came back, tight with rage. Send me the address. I'm on my way. That night, in the presidential suite of a luxury Santa Fe resort, the second act of the drama unfolded. Isabella, are you insane? Julian yelled, yanking at his tie. Chasing a substitute all over the country. And what about you? Isabella sneered, chasing me to fund your failing project. I sat on the couch, methodically peeling an orange, watching the melodrama as if it had nothing to do with me. Ethan, Julian suddenly turned on me. You took the money. You're supposed to honor the deal. I swallowed a slice of orange and held up my hands in a gesture of innocence. Hey, I didn't call her. Enough. Isabella grabbed her purse and threw it at Julian. How dare you try to pay him off? For 3 years, this was getting good. I leaned forward. For 3 years, he was lying to your face for a paycheck, Julian roared. Wake up, Isabella. He's just an actor. The room fell silent. I wiped my hands, stood up, and said, well, you two have fun with this. I'm leaving. Stay right there, they both shouted at the same time. I turned back, exasperated. Is there something else? Isabella took a deep breath and slapped a new contract down on the table. A new offer, $200,000 a month, and this time you just have to be yourself. Julian's face was a thundercloud. Ethan, don't you forget our agreement. I looked at the contract on the table, then at Julian's furious face, and I started to laugh. You know, Isabella, I said, picking up the contract and slowly ripping it in half. Some things money really can't buy. Damn, it felt good to be this rich. As they stared in stunned silence, I opened the door and walked out. The next morning, I was on a flight to Anchorage, Alaska. I smiled and powered down my phone. Let's see her follow me to the middle of nowhere. Outside the window, a sea of clouds rolled by under a brilliant sun. Freedom, it turned out, was priceless. The wind at the Anchorage airport carried the sharp chill of distant glaciers. I zipped up my parka and dragged my suitcase toward the shuttle bus. After 3 days of being off-grid, I turned my phone back on. The notifications came in like an avalanche. 27 messages from Isabella, 13 from Julian, and a handful from unknown numbers. I marked them all as read and opened Expedia to book a bed at a hostel, a latitude of 61 degrees north. Surely she wouldn't follow me here. The hostel was run by a grizzled guy who looked like he'd wrestled a bear and won. He took one look at me and grinned. Let me guess, kid. Woman trouble. My hand paused as I passed him my ID. Is it that obvious? Only 3 types of people come up to Alaska to get lost, he said, lighting a cigarette as he checked me in. The broke, the crazy, and the heartbroken. You don't look crazy. And that watch says you ain't broke. Leaves one option. I just smiled and took my key. The 6-bed dorm only had 2 other people in it. I claimed a top bunk by the window. I just tossed my pack up when a head popped up from the bunk below. New guy. It was a girl with a mess of dreadlocks and a small stud in her nose that glittered in the Arctic sunlight. Yeah, I grunted, not in the mood to chat. I'm Maya. Drove up here in my Jeep, she said, undeterred. What about you? What brings you to the last frontier? I lay back and stared at the ceiling. Came to breathe some free air. She snorted. Cliché, but judging by that look on your face, I'm guessing a rich girl dumped you. I shot upright so fast the bunk frame groaned in protest. Maya's eyes widened. Whoa. Nailed it. Not quite. I dumped the rich girl. Later that evening, I was smoking on the roof when Maya joined me with 2 cans of a local craft beer. Here, she said, handing one to me. Don't worry, I don't actually care about your love life, but you know, there's this old trapper in town. People say he can read your fortune in the northern lights. Total bull, but it's a good story. I took the can. Not really my thing. Come on, you're here anyway. Might as well, she said, bumping my shoulder. I'll drive you out there tomorrow. I was about to say no when I froze. In a street below, among the tourists and locals, one figure stood out, tall, graceful, and wearing an absurdly expensive-looking parka. Even with sunglasses and a scarf hiding most of her face, I knew that posture. Isabella Vance. The beer can slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the roof. What's wrong? Maya asked, following my gaze. Whoa, check out that chick. Damn. Wait, why do you look like you've seen a ghost? I grabbed her arm. Is there a back way out of this building? 5 minutes later, I was crouched behind a dumpster in the hostel's back alley, staring at my phone. I just pulled up the flight manifests. Isabella had landed in Anchorage the same day I did, just 2 hours later. So, that's her. The rich girl? Maya asked, crouching beside me and offering a cigarette. Damn, dude. Following you all the way to Alaska? That's next level. I lit the cigarette, my hand shaking slightly. Is there any way to get away from her? Easy, Maya said, blowing a smoke ring. Tomorrow we drive to Denali. People like her, their powers fade above 10,000 feet. Just as I was about to answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ethan, I see you. We need to talk. I stared at the message for 3 seconds, then started laughing. Maya, I said, crushing the cigarette under my boot. Can we leave right now? She raised an eyebrow. That desperate? I just realized something, I said, standing up and dusting myself off. Running isn't going to solve this. On the 3rd floor of a rustic lodge restaurant, Isabella took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were bloodshot. You've lost weight was the first thing she said. I poured myself a cup of strong black coffee. Isabella, what's the point of all this? I'm not here to chase you, she said suddenly. I'm here to apologize. My hand jerked, spilling coffee on the heavy wooden table. It took my security team 3 days of scanning airport surveillance to find your flight to Santa Fe, she said, looking down and turning her cup in her hands. Then I had them pull the flight records for every plane that left New Mexico. That's how I knew you came here. I frowned. What are you trying to say? I'm trying to say. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry for using you as a substitute for 3 years. Outside, the wind howled. I hadn't expected to hear that. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Julian was right. I was being selfish, she said with a bitter smile, pulling a large manila envelope from her bag. These are the things you left at the mansion. I thought you might want them back. I opened it. Inside were a few programming textbooks and an old battered laptop. The only things I brought with me from my old life, which I kept locked in a drawer for 3 years. My throat felt tight. You went through my things? I found them when I was cleaning out the room, she said, her expression unreadable. Ethan, who are you really? I snapped the envelope shut. This was a dangerous question. Just as the silence became unbearable, there was a commotion at the top of the stairs. Julian Croft appeared, out of breath, his tailored suit looking completely out of place in the rustic lodge. Oh, thank God for the plot. Where two are gathered, a third will inevitably appear. The unbreakable rule of melodrama. I knew it, he snarled, his eyes darting between me and Isabella. Isabella, do you have any idea what's happening with the energy project? The investors are waiting for you. Isabella didn't even look at him. The project is cancelled. What? Julian's face went pale. For him, for this. This replacement. I subtly scooted my chair to the side, out of spitting range. He's not a replacement, Isabella said calmly. He was the one by my side. He was the one who remembered everything. He was the one who stayed up all night when I was sick. Julian, what right do you have to call him that? Julian looked like he'd been punched. I cleared my throat awkwardly. Well, I'll leave you two to talk. I should just, don't you move, they both yelled. The few other diners in the restaurant were now openly staring. I sighed and pulled out my phone, dialing a number. Maya, you think her Jeep can fit one more? Half an hour later, while Isabella and Julian were still arguing about investment capital, I was in Maya's beat-up Jeep, speeding toward Denali National Park. In the rearview mirror, the lights of Anchorage grew smaller and smaller. Maya let out a whistle, so you just ran for it. I rolled down the window, letting the frigid, cleansing air whip through the car. What else was I supposed to do? You know, she said, cranking the wheel to avoid a moose. A guy like you deserves to be single. Some stories just need a final chapter. The dawn at Denali Base Camp was brutally cold. The wind tore across the prayer flags, making them snap and pop. I stood before the Climbers Memorial, watching the sunrise paint the peak in shades of gold. Maya, bundled in a massive parka, was stamping her feet to stay warm. God, this place is miserable. Even the air is made of ice. The hot water in my thermos already had a thin layer of ice on top. I unscrewed the cap and handed it to her. Hang in there. We get our pictures of the Golden Mountain and we're gone. I added, and for the record, you're the one who wanted to come here. She took the thermos, then jabbed me hard in the ribs. Look, 10 o'clock. I turned my head, my breath caught in my throat, dressed in a bright yellow expedition suit, looking like a single defiant flame against the snow. Isabella Vance was standing alone at the edge of the camp. The fierce wind whipped her hair across her face. Her nose and cheeks were red with cold, and tiny ice crystals clung to her eyelashes. No way, Maya whispered, her voice full of awe. Did she get here on a rocket ship? I instinctively reached for my phone only to remember we'd lost signal days ago. Isabella was already walking toward us, her heavy boots crunching on the frozen ground. Military helicopter, she said, her breath fogging in the air as she stopped in front of me. Unbelievable. Of course, in this world, that was a perfectly logical mode of transport for her. Ethan, we need to talk. I looked at her fingers, which were turning purple, and without a word, I took off my own down jacket and wrapped it around her. Back to the tent. Now, inside the communal tent of a climbing expedition, a small stove cast our shadows onto the canvas walls. Isabella held a mug of hot tea, her fingers slowly regaining their color. She reached into her inner pocket and pulled out a laptop. My laptop? I broke the password, she said, looking me straight in the eye. The code and the folders labeled Original World. Hot tea sloshed over the rim of my mug, scalding my hand. Outside, I could hear the faint dingle of bells from a pack of yaks and the distant sound of climbers singing. You're from another place, aren't you? Her voice was quiet, but it hit me like a thunderclap. The stove crackled, the flames reflecting in her bloodshot eyes. I noticed a small bandage was still stuck to her pinky finger from where she'd cut it on a broken coffee cup a week ago. Something like that. I finally admitted a parallel universe, I guess. To my surprise, she smiled, a look of profound relief on her face. That explains it. Why you always looked at me like I was a science experiment. You don't think it's insane compared to everything else? She ran a finger over a worn sticker on the laptop's corner. I'm more interested in what would have happened if there was no contract. Nothing, I said. My voice firm. We were always two parallel lines. Her pupils contracted slightly. Then she let out a soft, humorless laugh. So cruel. You won't even let me have the fantasy. This is me being responsible, I said, adding a block of fuel to the stove. You weren't in love with me. You were in love with the illusion of being perfectly cared for. A gust of wind shook the tent violently. A sliver of sunlight pierced a seam in the canvas, landing on her open palm. I could see the faint pink line of a scar there from a year ago when she'd shielded me from a piece of flying glass. "I know," she said suddenly. "I think I figured it out when I lost you back in New Mexico." She pulled an envelope from her pocket. "This is for you." A bank card gleamed in the firelight. I raised an eyebrow. "Julian's?" "After I froze all his assets, he came begging like a dog," she said, a bitter smile on her lips. "He told me everything, including how he paid you off," she added. "He won't be in any position to bother you again." We both started laughing, a sound that startled the snowbuntings outside the tent. Was that a threat? I didn't even want to know, Ethan. For the first time, she deliberately put space between us. "I came to tell you that I'm letting you go." The firelight danced in her eyes, and I realized the obsessive heat was gone, replaced by a clear, calm resolve. "What's next for you?" I asked, handing her a fresh mug of tea. "Rebuilding Vance Electronics," she said, taking the cup. Her pinky finger curled out slightly, a habit she'd once painstakingly copied from Julian that had now become her own. "And I enrolled in some online courses at MIT." I noticed her phone background was now a class schedule. The lock screen was an old photo of a little girl standing in front of a weathered sign that read Vance Electronics. "That's great," I said, and I meant it. As she stood up, she knocked over a hiking pole. It clattered against the tent floor. We both bent down to get it, our foreheads nearly touching. I caught the faint scent of her perfume, but for the first time, it didn't make my heart skip a beat. "Take care of yourself," she said, and then she hugged me. A quick, strong embrace. The fabric of our parkas rustling. "And thank you for the coffee." I watched her walk toward the helicopter, her bright yellow suit, a shrinking dot against the vast expanse of white. Maya appeared at my side as if from thin air. "So that's it. It's over." "I guess so," I said, feeling the bank card in my pocket, its sharp edges a comforting reality. 3 months later, the rainy season in Kathmandu. I was sitting in a cafe in Durbar Square watching rain drip from the eaves of an ancient temple. On my laptop was a newly opened email from Isabella Vance with attachments. 1. A photo of the Vance Electronics IPO launch party on the Nasdaq. 2. A close-up of an MIT acceptance letter. 3. A photo of a newly built computer lab at an orphanage. The body of the email contained only one line. "Finally learned how to make my own coffee." I smiled and closed the laptop. On the cafe's television, a financial news anchor was reporting. Vance Electronics has officially severed ties with the Croft conglomerate, pivoting its focus entirely to artificial intelligence. My phone vibrated. A voice message from Maya, thick with the smell of sea salt. "Made it to Sri Lanka, and you'll never guess who I saw at the port. That idiot Julian working on a cargo freighter." I sent back a laughing emoji and opened my travel journal. Tucked inside the front cover was a bank card with a balance of $6,321,784.36. Outside, the rain had stopped. A flock of white doves soared past a glistening stupa. A young girl selling marigolds walked by, humming a familiar pop song. I glanced one last time at the photos in the email. At the launch party, Isabella was wearing a sharp-tailored suit, her eyes bright as stars, parallel lines finally extending toward their own distant horizons. End.